to paint through this, we're using our projection brush. I'm going to make sure stamp image is off. I don't want to use a stamp right now. Color. We are going to project, if this is white, it's going to project this color from this image directly onto there. If we tint this to maybe be like red, it's still going to project this color, but it's going to add this red to it as well. So see how it's red? I don't want that. So, you know, white, maybe like a mid-gray if you want it to be that way. I'm going to go with white though. Strength is kind of important. You see how it's semi-transparent? If I make the strength higher, it's going to paint it like 1 for 1. So I'm probably going to go with a strength of like 10 for now. And I'm also going to reduce the size of this and bring in my brush a little bit. I'm holding B and clicking drag to change the size of my brush. And I'm just going to paint this on here. I'm going to move the stencil a little bit. Paint. So right now, don't worry too much about how the details are matching up with your initial coat, you know? Hold on. Just consider this as like the base layer. You don't need it to be perfect in the first pass. Okay, so there's like one side is done. You can see it's stretching over the top there because I just hit it from a weird angle. It considers the angle when it's painting it on there. So, you know, you want to be kind of like straight on whatever surface you're going to be painting. And you can of course change your fall off and whatnot in your settings over here if you want to, you know, change how that edge hits. Right now we've got kind of like a soft brush, sort of like a S fall off. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue painting this first base layer. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to make it less flat, more dynamic, more interesting. Okay. I'm going to be careful on these edges that you don't go too far, because you've already painted the sides and you don't want to get that stretched effect on the sides too much. There's a little bit of it got on there, but that's okay. I just want to avoid the majority of it. Okay. So just go slow, you know, don't rush it. Nothing good comes from rushing. You can see my texture looks like it's repeating a lot, you know, across the surface. But that's one of the other nice things about painting your texture on, is that when I go in and do another pass, I'm gonna randomize that surface a little bit and not have not have, you know, direct repeating textures all over. Okay. So you can see we're doing pretty good now. Almost done with the first pass, which will probably be the majority of the work anyway. Okay, these little edges here are going to be sort of a pain, I think. So I want to go over. It's alright for now. Using a smaller brush, but you want to keep your stencil pretty much the same size, because you don't want the texture to look like all the bricks are larger in one area. Painting organic surfaces is really nice in mudbox, because you can just make it feel really randomized and loose. You don't have to worry about all the little edges and everything, so it's great for if you want to do some characters or some plant life or terrain. Hard surfaces, sometimes you can't really get it how you want in mudbox. So a lot of hard surfaces you do end up having to do a lot of it in Photoshop to get everything laid out good. And I'm gonna have these little inner parts here that I'm gonna have to do. I just want to watch the edges. Take it slow. Don't rush. Don't rush. It's so easy to just plow ahead and try and do it super fast, but it shows. It shows if you take the time to do it right. And this is going to be something that I'm going to use. I want this to be a legit texture here. I'm not trying to do just an example test piece. I want something that I'm going to use. So we're going to go in and we're going to make this thing look pretty nice. Okay, check everything. These ends got, I don't know if I did them or if they just got messed up. Just hit those again. Okay, there's some distortion around these edges a little bit. I want to just touch some of that up. You can bring the strength down to well, it's going to be dependent on the size of your scene and the detail of your object, but I'm going to bring the strength down, and I'm going to try and blend certain areas that they don't look quite right, and having it softer is going to make it, the edges, a little bit easier to deal with. They're not going to be as intense. I don't know that that's really any better. Let's maybe turn this up. Maybe turn it up to 5. Okay, and this. Okay, so you want it to just kind of blend in together with decent this is something that's going to be, it's probably not going to be a major focus of my project, so it doesn't need to be a world-class bridge, but it just needs to look nice at a glance. When you see it over there, you need to be like, oh, that's a bridge. It's made out of stone, looks good. Okay. I didn't do any of the bottom here, so I just kind of forgot about it. These bricks are maybe a little big, but again, you're not going to really see the bottom of the bridge, so what you do see of it is it just needs to look good at a glance. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make it believable. Not too many people get caught up in realism. It's not necessary to make everything hyper realistic. It just needs to be believable. It needs to be good. When you look at it, you should just be like, oh, that's a nice bridge. It doesn't need to go into, oh, that one brick is an inch off to the left or something, you know? Most people are not going to analyze your work that closely. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. It looks like I messed up some of it here when I did the underside. A little bit on this side too. You can get as detailed, as intense with this as you want. If you want to be crazy serious, then go for it. By all means, but for my purposes, it doesn't need to go too far. I'm gonna see if I have some moss in here. I want some moss. Yeah. Okay, so I have some moss in here. I'm gonna set as a stencil. Essentially, what we're gonna do now is we're gonna dirty everything up. So I'm gonna get my airbrush tool out. And we want to kind of put in some dirt, so I'm just going to go with like a brown. And this is where we're going to start using stamps. So I'm going to set my stamp initially to this kind of like mottled whatever. Keep randomize on. That's good. Oh, my brush is really big, so let's bring that down. I'm just going to do this real quick to see what it kind of looks like. I like that. I think it's good. You want to watch your stamp spacing when you're doing this. If it's too low, it'll put the stamp right on top of it like instantly. It'll be like stamp, 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 stamp. And that'll end up just kind of like making everything turn brown instead of looking like dirt. So usually I find 60, around 60 is good for a nice even coat with the kind of like mottled texture. So I'm not going to worry about fall off or anything. And keep your brush kind of big for the surface. The strength seems to be okay. Let's turn it down to like 12. Let's see what that looks like. Okay. So you can see it's just kind of like breaking up the surface a little bit. It's adding in a little bit of color. It's subtle, but it's there, In certain areas I'm going to want to hit more, like, I know I'm going to sink this part into the ground, so I'm just going to make that, like, really kind of darker brown. You can see my texture is a little messed up there. But I'm not going to worry about that too much. I think it'll be okay. I'll probably show this side of the bridge because it's better. But I'm going to go ahead and dirty this side up anyway. And I'm putting it kind of like at the bottom mostly, because that's where I would expect to find like the most dirt buildup. Especially right here where I'm going to have kind of this end in the terrain. I want that to be really dirty. So you go in, and you do a coat, and you pick a different color. Do something a little lighter, and you do another coat. It's subtle. It's not going to be super obvious that you're using different colors, but it's going to add to the effect. You know, it's going to make it look better. That's a mistake that a lot of people make, is they try and make everything perfect, and you know, they want stuff to be believable and they want it to be realistic, but at the same time they want it to be perfect. And in reality, you know, nothing is perfect. Nothing is perfectly clean. Nothing is perfectly even. It just doesn't happen. So if you want your stuff to be believable, especially your textures, you need dirt. You need grime. You need stuff that's going to make it seem like it exists in the world. So now, I'm going to use some moss. Now, you can use the projection brush, the stencil. You can use the stencil with, like, the airbrush if you want to, but you don't get the color from the projection, so you'd have to choose your own color. So I could choose, like, this green, and I could paint it up there. And I'm also using the stamp still. If I turn the stamp off, then I just get from the projection. But I'm going to try this, because I want the real color. But I'm going to turn the strength way down. Let's try 0.5. That's probably not enough, so let's try 1. 1 is pretty good. Let's try like 0.8 and bring up the size a little bit. Oops. There we go. Okay. So let's just say there's some moss kind of growing along the edge here. You know? And like I said, if you wanted to tint this, you could use a color other than white, which I'll probably do. I'm probably going to add in a little bit of brown, something to just make it a little bit more interesting. And you can also use you know, the stamps if you want to do something where, you know, maybe we have this brick pattern kind of and on top of the projection, so it's like I'm only going to paint it in that sort of pattern. Okay, so I'm just trying to like assess this and see how I like it. So far I'm pretty happy with it. Okay, I definitely want moss up on my road. And it's going to be, you know, a bridge over a river, so, or a stream or whatever. So it's going to probably have some gunk growing in it. This is going to make that more believable. Definitely want it around the edges there. The other nice thing about adding grime and stuff is hide your mistakes. You know, there's mistakes in this texture, but adding all this grime is going to kind of take the viewer away from those mistakes and have them focusing on other things, you know, the believability of it. So I'm not going to worry too much about this side, so I'm not going to show that. you could take that side all the way through if you wanted it, super complete. But I know that I'm not going to have that in my camera, so if you don't see it, it's kind of not worth the extra work. So that looks really good, in my opinion. I'm sure there's people that can make better bridges, but it looks good for, less than 300 polys. And we're going to go ahead and add in a new layer here. This time we're going to go with the bump map. Okay? Get a sip of coffee. Alright, so for our bump map, you just want to make sure you have the bump layer selected. So, selected here. Now for this, I'm going to use the projection brush again, and I'm going to use that stone brick texture. I'm going to use this one, which is my actual bump texture, just because it's black and white. I don't need any color in my bump map. Now remember, in Maya, black goes in, white comes up, and a 50% gray color is no change. So if I were to paint this with just a straight up white color, it's going to be probably too intense. So I'm going to turn off this stamp image. I don't want that for this. And I'm going to change my color to about a medium gray, a 50% gray. Okay. Make my brush bigger. So you can see that is like really not looking good at all. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the strength of this. I'm going to bring this down to like 10, which isn't going to affect the end map, but it's going to affect how it looks in here. And then within Maya, we can change that bump depth to, something more acceptable. So you can try and match up the little edge bits, the little cracks and stuff if you want to. I just want to kind of create a roughness on the surface that's somewhat believable, just to break it up a little bit and make it a little more interesting. I'm not concerned with matching up every little crack. That would be kind of an insane amount of extra work for this. But you could do that if you're doing a more detailed piece. You might want to do that. I didn't go back and change this repetitiveness in here because I decided that, this is going to be kind of the camera angle that I'm going to see this from. So you're not going to see that. So, again, I'm just trying to reduce my workload by not doing a bunch of unnecessary stuff. You can do this under here if you want. And you can see that it's pretty subtle. It's not a huge thing, but it just breaks up the surface a little bit. Maybe something like 20 would be better. You could even come in here and just kind of blur that if you wanted to make it, it's 2.5. If you wanted to make it less sharp, I guess, obviously, that way it looks more spread out and more diffuse from a distance. So that's pretty good. The last thing I want to do is I'm going to go back to my diffuse layer here and add in some contrastiness by burning and dodging. So I'm going to leave this on midtones for now. Let's see just how this looks. It's a little dark. I'm going to try it with a stamp. Maybe kick the strength up to like 3 or 4 in this case. What I'm going to do is I'm going to burn around the edges, because that just kind of feels more natural to have like darker corners, you know, have sort of that shadow effect in there. It's almost like a fake occlusion, if you can put that in there, and it just breaks up that surface even more. It just adds a little bit more value, different values, different tones, which is going to make it pop more and feel deeper, more dynamic. You know, I'm not an expert at texturing any of this stuff, so you know, don't think my word is the end all of it, but these are just things that I've found that work for me. And you can see how like just we did that and added all this depth. Now if I dodge, I can come in here and dodge some of these inner parts to make it even pop a little bit more. I don't want that though. I want a little bit of modeling here, and I want maybe a little less strength. Let's try 7. Almost can't really see that, can I? Let's try this with 2. Now I've added that right on there. Now I can kind of see that, so I'll make my brush a little bit bigger. Just going to take it around. Okay, I'm not going to do too much with that because it looks fine, I think. So, now we've got textures. How do we get them into Maya? Well, it's really easy. You just go up here, File, Export All Paint Layers. Okay? Make sure that your path is correct and that your file name is correct. I'm going to call this Bridge 01, as I have been. And I'm going to leave this money sign L, money sign C. It tells you what those mean down here. It's the paint layer name, which, you know, will be like paint layer 1 here, and then it's channel name, which is going to be diffuse and bump map. So we're going to have paint layer 1 diffuse, we're going to have paint layer 2 bump map. Okay, so that's just going to help me identify the textures better. And that looks correct, so export. Okay, so now we can go back into Maya. I don't have lighting and stuff set up in this particular scene, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my main scene where I have lighting and I have all my render settings correct. Okay, you can see I have some other stuff going on in this scene, so let's just kind of import that bridge 01 UV. It's going slow. There we go. Okay, so I've got my bridge. I'm going to move that down a little bit. Okay. We need to assign a new material to this. I use mental ray. I use mental ray a lot. So I'm going to add a MIA material X, which is the Maya mental ray architectural material with bump map. My preset, I'm going to go to a matte finish initially. I'm going to turn the reflectivity up. The other thing I want to do, here's my bump map here, and my diffuse, my color layer. I'm not going to mess with the color, but I'm going to open the bump map. Okay. Now you can see that transparency because we never did a fill on the bump map. But if you want to, you can come in here with a 50% gray, create a background layer. You can see stuff a little bit better. You can see our bump map is pretty deep. It's got a lot of black in it, so you could adjust the levels. I'll probably just fix it in Maya. What I am going to do is going to merge these layers. I'm just adjusting the levels because I want to create a reflectivity, glossiness, whatever kind of a map. So keep that in line with my naming conventions. No layers, save, no image compression. Okay. So now we're ready to create our shader. Open up my Hypershade. Got this MIA material X9, which I'm going to rename to Bridge One Material. Okay. So I like to check my bump and my reflection stuff first. So first thing I'm going to do is go to the glossiness here, create a file, and that's going to be that Bridge 01 Reflect. Okay. Go into my Hypershade. Let's take a better look at this material. I'm going to copy this file to color as well. Okay. Let's see if this looks any good or not. I'm seeing a little bit of effect in here where you can see like it's sort of a little mottled. There's a little bit of difference in the surface. It's not huge. It's not even hardly noticeable. Try turning up the reflectivity a little bit. Also, I want to change these normals to be softer. Okay. Let's try it one more time with a little bit higher reflectivity. Okay, so I can see it's like breaking up the reflection a little bit. It's kind of just adding in a little bit of difference. You almost can't see it, but it is going to make a difference. It's going to make a little bit of a difference. And, you know, it's that whole thing of breaking up the surface. The less perfect it is, the more realistic it is. So then we'll go ahead and add in the bump map, which is going to be probably a pretty big difference. I'm going to go with the standard bump here. Go to File. I know the bump depth is not going to be good at 1. I'm going to change it to 0.1 to start with. Bridge 01. Bump. Okay. I'm using viewport 2.0 and you can kind of see where it's displaying that bump on here. And if I render that, you should see a pretty decent bump. I could also create this bump directly from my color map, my diffuse map in Photoshop, and you know, just change it to black and white and adjust the levels, and that might give me more realism because it might add to the cracks. I mean, let's go ahead and just do that because I want to see what that looks like. So I'm going to open this color up. I'm going to go to Adjustments, Black and White. Okay. I'm going to go to my levels. I'm just going to bring in these output levels because, again, remember that 50% gray is no change. So we want some change, but we don't want it to be huge. So. Okay, so I'm going to try this as a bump map. Let's try this. I'm just going to call this Bridge 01 Bump 2. Okay, Bridge 01 Bump 2. Let's just go ahead and re-render this. Seems like my... oh, there we go. Yeah. So you can see that's like much more subtle, but it's also got all of the same cracks and everything. So that might be the better option there. And it's also breaking up the reflection a bit more. I might even want to use this for the for that sort of glossy map, just to add even more. But right now I'm going to leave it as it is because I'm pretty happy with it. Let's go ahead and add in our color. It's going to be this diffuse here. Okay. So that's on there. I'm going to go to my hypershade. I just want to keep this. Oops. I just want to keep this like a little bit more organized. I'm going to delete these here. Just attach to the default. That's just my UV placement there, but you know, if I ever wanted to change that, I could just change this one. All three of those will match up. Which I won't need to for this, but just for the sake of keeping it all the same. Okay. So now, I'm probably going to go ahead and kick this roughness up a little bit. Okay. No, I'm going to mess with that again. Let's take a look. Okay. So rendering it out. I'm using Final Gather. Obviously, I'm rendering in Mental Ray since we're using a Mental Ray material. My settings aren't super high though, so it's not too crazy. Render time. almost doesn't look dark enough to me now. It looks pretty good, but it's not quite as dark as I would like. I'm gonna go in here. I'm gonna adjust my brightness and contrast. I really want to bring this stuff out and let the light of the scene do the work. So let's try this. I'm not going to save over my other image because, you know, if I end up wanting to go back to it or something. I'm just going to call this color 2. So I'm just going to make a few changes here. Picture 1, color 2. And I also have decided that I want to bring bump up. Try like 3. Ooh, yeah. My bump is probably a little bit more than it should be, but I know that from a distance it's not going to be as obvious. I want to be able to have that little more impact from it from a distance, so I'm probably going to leave it higher. And I'm just going to check this highlight here because it's almost a little too glossy to me. So I'm just going to bring down the reflectivity and see what I get. Almost not even changed there. Let's see. Bring it way down. Okay. I don't want the surface to be a matte finish, but I don't want it to be like if it just rained and I don't know, the thing's covered in grease or something. You know, you don't want it to be too shiny, but you do want some reflectivity because that's going to add that subtle bit of realism. I think we can come up just a little bit more. Go to 0.25. Okay. I think that's okay. I'm seeing just a little bit of reflectivity in there. The bridge looks pretty nice. There's good contrast, good detail in this lighting. Let's see how it looks from a little bit further away. I think it's going to be good. I'm pretty happy with that. Just checking it out. I guess my lighting just doesn't cover any of that area, but it looks good. I'm happy with it. So that's that. We took it from, you know, being just kind of like a crappy looking low poly bridge to Now something that's feels a lot more real, feels more dynamic, and it's just like a lot more interesting to look at. It's going to look good in the scene, and it's going to match some of this other stuff that I've got going on over here. So I hope that this tutorial has kind of shown you guys how to go about building textures that are believable. We talked about UV mapping, we talked about how to paint the textures, how to do some stuff in Photoshop, and I just want to wish you all luck on your projects, and I'll see you next time. Maybe we'll talk about normal mapping and how to take something from low poly to like a high res model with lots of detail, and then use that to create the normal map and still utilize the low poly while having it appear more detailed. So that's pretty much that. Let me know if you have any questions or thoughts or requests, and we'll see if we can get to any of that. Maybe I'll do a little bit more recording for some of these other parts of this project, but that's the basics of doing a texture. For me, that's my process. That's how I like to go about it. And you know, there's other ways to do it. There's quicker ways and easier ways, but this is a good way for getting a quality result. So that's that. Talk to y'all later.